Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi shir.
Shalom and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Brachos Daf Lamed Tes. We're on the last line of Lamed Ches Amud Vei. Says the Gemara, Amalei Rav Yomi Rav Zera. Rav Yomi asked Rav Zera the following question: Rav Yochanan Heichim Mevorech Al Zayis Maliach. The Gemara before related an incident that Rav Yochanan was served a salted olive, and he made a bracha before eating it, and a bracha achrona afterwards. Says Rav Yirmiyah, how could it be that Rav Yochanan would make a bracha achrona? What's the problem? Kivan dishkila legarine, because once you removed the pit, which is inedible, what are you left with? How much fruit is left? Batzale shiura, you have less than the required amount to be considered to be a ma'aseh achila. As Rashi explains, the chiyuv bracha, the obligation to make a bracha, is only on a ma'aseh achila, an act of eating, as the pasuk says, "Ve'ochalta v'savalta v'rachta." When you will eat, you make a bracha. And as we know, we learn this from Halacha L'Moshe Messina. What is the shir achila? What is the amount required to be considered to be an act of eating a ma'aseh achila? That is a shir kazayis. The shir, the amount which is equal to the volume of a olive. So in this case, once you removed the pit, which is inedible, how much zayis, how much fruit is left here? Less than the volume of an olive, because the edible portion of the olive is less than the total volume of the olive. So if Rabbi Yochanan merely ate one olive and he removed the pit, so he ate less than a shir achila. And why was he required to make a bracha achrona? Explains Tosfos, this Gemara's discussion is only regarding the bracha achrona, because certainly a bracha rishona prior to eating, that is said even on a minute amount of food, and that is no question here. The question only is regarding bracha achrona. Since the amount left over after removal of the pit is less than the volume of a olive, why did he make a bracha achrona? Amar lei, so Rav Zera responds, do you think that when the Chacham speak about the shir achila requiring the volume of a zayis, we're speaking about a large size olive? No, because zayis beinin binan, we require the volume of a medium size olive. Now that olive that was served to Rabbi Yochanan was actually zayis gadol, it was a large size olive. The afagav the shaklu l'garinusa, even after you removed the inedible pit, pashle shiurei, the amount of fruit that was left equaled in volume the size of a medium-sized olive, and therefore required a bracha achrona. This nan, as we learned in the Mishnah, zayis shamru, whenever the Chacham spoke about the shir kazayis regarding a shir of achila, like katan, they're not referring to a small-sized olive, like gadol, not an oversized olive, or beinani, a medium-sized olive. V'zeu aguri, we're referring to a medium-sized aguri olive, a certain species of olives, and the medium-sized aguri olive, that is the volume required for a shir achila. V'amar Ravo, lo aguri shmoi, the true name is not really aguri, el avruti shmoi, the true name is avruti. V'amar, some say the true name is avrusi shmoi. If so, why do we refer to this type of olive with the term aguri? V'lo maniku shmoi aguri, because of its nature. Because its oil is stored within it, as Rashi explains, unlike ordinary fruit juice, which is absorbed within the flesh of the fruit and needs to be extracted. This type of olive was very rich in oil, and the oil was gathered within it, collected within it, and was ready to be extracted from the olive. So therefore, it is called aguri on account of the fact that the oil is ready to come out. So in conclusion, when we speak about a shir kazayis regarding achila, it is not a large or small size olive, but rather the medium, it has to be equal to the volume of a medium-sized aguri olive. Continues the Gemara, Neima Ketanoi. The Gemara here is going back to the discussion regarding cooked vegetables. We had a discussion earlier whether cooked vegetables require hadama or whether they're merely shahakal. Says the Gemara, perhaps we could connect this to a machlekes tanoim, whether the proper bracha is hadama or shahakal. There was a following incident. Dahanu to a talmidei. There were two students. Daviyas v'kamed rakapara. They were sitting in front of Bakapara. Haviu lefneim kruv v'dur muskin upargis. They were served several dishes. Kruv, cooked cabbage, v'dur muskin, cooked spinach. Rashi says it's also some type of cabbage. Upargis, and they were also served flesh from a bird flesh. Rashi says it's called par deraya. So they had two different varieties of food: cooked vegetables and bird meat. Nosam bar kapara rishus lechad ben levarach. Bar kapara honored one of them with the opportunity to make the bracha rishayna on behalf of everybody. Kafetz ubirach ala pargiyos. So the Talmud hastily went ahead and made the bracha on the bird meat. Without consulting Bar Kapara, he opted to make the bracha on the pargiyos. Ligleg olav chaveroi, his friend, mocked him. Kas Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara got angry and he said, Omar, he said, Lo yalam mavarach anikoyis. I'm not angry on the Talmud who made the bracha, and perhaps he made an error. No, I'm not angry about that. Why am I angry? I'm upset on the one that belittled, that made fun. Because because if your friend appears as though he has never tasted the taste of basar, of meat, and therefore in his eyes the basar, the bird's meat, was favorable, it was his favorite food now, and therefore he opted to make the bracha on the bird's meat because this was his chaviv, this was dear to him. But you, why did you make fun of him? Why did you belittle? Why did you mock him? I understand why he did what he did, but why did you do what you did? Then he went in and continued and he said as follows. This is Bar Kapara speaking. I'm not angry at the malaglig, at the one who mocked, but rather I'm upset at the one who made the bracha. And Bar Kapara said as follows: if you don't reckon with my wisdom, zikna enkan, what happened to seniority? What happened to the fact that I'm older? You should have consulted with me regarding which one you should choose to make a bracha on it and be moitzi and exempt the other one. Meaning, even if they're both the same bracha, if the vegetables and the meat require the same bracha, and you made a bracha on one and exempted you moitzi the other one, but you should have asked me which one was the one to prefer and to proceed to be magdim, to make the bracha on that and to be moitzi the other one. Why didn't you consult with me? Continues the Gemara, Tana, we learned and they both did not survive the year, they passed away on account of Bar Kapara's reaction. Says the Gemara, okay, let's analyze the story. One Talmud, he opted to make the bracha on the bird's meat. The other one said, no, you should have made a bracha on the vegetables. Apparently, because he mocked him, he was malaglik. He didn't like what he did. Apparently he held the proper way was to make a bracha on the vegetables. So how are we going to understand this dispute? What is this machlekes? What is the svara that they're arguing about? My lava must be b'hokam ifliki. This is the basis for their dispute. The mevarich savar, the one that actually made the bracha, he made a bracha on the bird's meat at shahakol. He held that all the dishes served to them all have an equal bracha of shahakol. The cooked vegetables, the bird's meat, they're all shahakol. And therefore, since he favored the bird's meat, so he opted to make the bracha on the chaviv, on the item that was more dear to him, that was more favorable to him. And by doing so, we might see the other one. Says the Gemara, the Mevarach Savad, one made the bracha, holds shlokoitz upargiyah shakol nibadvari. The cooked vegetables, the bird's meat are both shahakol nibadvari. They both have the same bracha. Hilkach. If so, the question is which one should have the bracha and be mighty the other one? Hilkach chaviv adif. Therefore, he opted to prefer the bird's meat, which was chaviv to him, which was favorable to him. Umalaglik savar. However, the other Tana held shlokis bar priyadama. Cooked vegetables require not a shahakal, but rather bar priyadama. They retain their status. They're considered to be on the same level as their parent, as the vegetable itself. We make a hadama. So we have a choice between vegetables which require hadama. However, pargis, the bird's meat, was shakal nibadvari. So when we have a choice between making a hadama or a shahakal, which one goes first? Hilkuch peira adif. The bracha on the fruit, on the vegetables, comes first, as Rashi explains. Bar priyadama is a more specific bracha, as opposed to shakal, which is a more general bracha. Shakoil nibadvari. Bar priyadama is a more chashav bracha, a more significant bracha, a more specific bracha. Therefore, that should be recited first. And therefore, he was malaklik, he mocked the practice of his colleague. So again, the one that was mevarech on the pargius held, all the dishes served in front of them required the same bracha. Therefore, it's just the question of which one should have the bracha and be made to the other one. So he opted for the chavif, for the bird's meat, which was more favorable to him. However, the other Tana held that cooked vegetables require hadama. Therefore, now it's a question of what comes first, hadama or shahakal. Certainly, hadama precedes shahakal. So apparently, we have a machlekes tanaim regarding the halacha, the status of cooked vegetables. Do they lose their original status and they are degraded and considered to be a shahakal, or they retain the original halacha, the original din, the original bracha, and we make a hadama? So Gemara, let's interpret the story a little different. The kuli alma, everybody agrees, everybody holds. Shlokois ufragiyos shakolni midvari. Everybody holds that all the dishes that were served before them require merely a shahakal, including the cooked vegetables. If so, what was the basis for their disagreement? They're disagreeing regarding the following reasoning, the following svara. Whenever we have two foods that have an equal bracha, they're both the same bracha, the question is merely which one should have the bracha, and by doing so exempt the other one, which one do we opt for? Which one precedes? Mar Savar, one held Chaviv Adif, the one that is dear to him, that takes precedence, and therefore he made a bracha on the pragiyos, and by doing so he was mitzi the cooked vegetables on their bracha of shakal. Omar Savar, however, the one that was malaglek, he held Kruv Adif de Zayin. Although both require shakal, however, you should have preceded, you should have made a bracha on the kruv, on the cooked cabbage, since it is a more significant food, it is zayin, it sustains. Therefore, it is more chashiv, and the bracha should have taken place on the kruv, on the cabbage, instead of the bird's meat. So, in summary, the Gemara concludes that everybody will hold that cooked vegetables require merely a shakal nimitvari. They lose their status. The question merely is, what takes precedent? Does chaviv take precedent, or does zayin take precedent? Continues the Gemara, three separate halachas regarding brachos on food. Amar Rav Zera, ki avina b'Rav Huna. When I was by Rav Huna, Amar Lani told us the following halacha. Hani gargalida delifta, these turnip heads, paramina piriraba, if he cut them up, he diced them up in large pieces, so the bracha remains b'er priyadama. Prima zuta, but if he diced them very small, then it loses its status. Perhaps the taste gets dissipated, it loses its significance, and we merely recite shakol nibadvari. So that was the halacha that I heard from Rav Huna. However, Rav Yuda, when I arrived to Rav Yuda, Amar, he told us no, idi b'er priyadama. Regardless of whether you cut them into large pieces or small pieces, both of them require ber priyadama. It doesn't get degraded, it doesn't lose its chashiva, its significance. Why does he dice them very fine? So that its taste sweetens. Quite the contrary, it's meant to benefit, to improve its taste. And certainly, it doesn't lose its status and remains with the ber priyadama. So in conclusion, turnip heads that were diced, that were sliced, regardless of the size of the pieces, the bracha remains ber priyadama. Says another halacha. Amar Rav Ashi ki avina b'Rav Kahana. When I was by Rav Kahana, Amar Lan, he told us the following halacha. Tafshil de silka, a cooked dish of beets, that not much flour is put into this dish, so it retains its bracha of ber priyadama. However, the lifta, the mafshaba kimcha, the dish made of the turnips, where much flour is poured into it, the mafshaba kimcha tfei, they put a lot of flour in there, so now it gets elevated to the status of ber mina mezainis, has the status of a mezainis, and the proper bracha is not hadama, but rather mezainis. V'hadar amar, but then Rav Kahana changed and he told us, no, ber priyadama. Whether you put in a bit of flour or a lot of flour, doesn't matter. The cooked vegetables remain with a ber priyadama. Why? Why does one put a lot of flour into the dish? It is not for the food value of the flour. to give it the satiating abilities, but rather the devuki ba'alma avdila. It's merely there as a binding agent, and therefore since it's not there for its food value, it doesn't change the status of the cooked vegetable, and it remains a cooked vegetable, regardless of how much flour is in there, and we recite a boire priyadama. This halacha is applicable in many situations. For instance, like the licorice that has, they make today with flour, and that flour is considered to be a binding agent, and therefore the bracha is shakol mitvari. So in summary, we have two halachas. The turnip heads that were diced, very fine, doesn't lose its status. Just the opposite. The dicing actually enhances its flavor, and the bracha remains a ber priyadama. And then we learned regarding flour that's put in as a binding agent. It doesn't require mezainis, since it's merely there to be medabik, to serve as a binder, and not for its food value. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Chizda, Tavshel shel trodin, a dish made of beets, Yofa leiv, it's healthy for the heart, v'tavil einayim, it's good for the eyes, v'koshim neiv me'ayim, and certainly for one's intestines. It's a healthy dish. Amar Abaye, it's only if it's very cooked. If it's sitting on top of the oven, cooking away until it starts bubbling, it makes this bubbling sound, that's when it's truly healthy. Continues the Gemara, the third halacha regarding food, Amar Rav Papa. Pshitali, it is simple, it is evident, it is pasha to me, that maya de silka kesilka, the water of beets, meaning beet soup, has the same halacha, has the same bracha as the beets themselves. We make a ber priyadama on beet soup. Umay de lifta kalifta, the same thing regarding turnip soup. Umay de kula shilki kula shilki, the same thing regarding the water, the soup of all vegetables. They have the halacha of the vegetable itself, which is a ber priyadama. What about maya de shivsamai? What about water which the dill was cooked into? The dill soup. What halacha does that liquid have? Lumatuke taima avdi. Is the dill present there to impart its flavor? It's meant to give off a tame flavor, and therefore when the water absorbs the taste of the dill, we make adama. Or perhaps the purpose of the presence of dill is not to enhance flavor, but rather lavuri zoma of dill. It's meant to remove a bad odor. So since the purpose is not for flavor, there's no ber priyadam. Tashma, let's bring a raya. Hasheves mishnah nosna tam b'keder. This is a mishnah in Uktzin that sheves, which is this dill, as soon as it imparted its flavor into the dish, ein bo mishum truma, it loses its status of truma. We have a stalk of sheves, which is truma. Once it cooked into the gedera and it imparted, gave away its flavor, it loses its status of truma. It's considered to be a mere stick and an edible item. It doesn't possess tumas eichlin. It doesn't have the status of eichlin, and it can become tamei as an eichel. It loses its status. Shma mino, we see from here, apparently, what's the point and purpose of putting dill into a dish? Limtuka taima avdila shma mino. Obviously, the point is to impart flavor, to enhance the flavor of the dish. And that's why the Mishnah tells us, once it does its job, it imparts its flavor, so now it gave it away, and it loses all properties of food. It's merely like a piece of wood. So apparently, dill is meant to impart flavor, and the water in which dill was cooked in, the dill soup, requires a ber priyadama, just like all other vegetable soups. Now, the Mefarshim asked the obvious kasha. Here we say that vegetable soup has the same din as vegetables. And last blot we learned, Rav Shua teaches us that fruit juices require me'or shakolim b'dvarei. They don't have the same status as their parent fruit. We merely say a shahakol on them. Why is vegetable soup different? So there are two approaches in the Rishonim. Rosh says, here we're speaking about cooked vegetables. When you cook an item, it imparts a much greater flavor. The water absorbs a much deeper, a much more enhanced level of flavor, and therefore it gets the same halacha of the parent fruit, regardless of whether we're speaking about fruits that were cooked or vegetables that were cooked. The Rashba says this Gemara is specifically regarding vegetables, since it is the norm to use these vegetables for cooking purposes to make with them soup, and therefore, in a soup form, when you ingest it in a soup form, this is the proper form. This was the tzura, which was intended originally when this vegetable was planted. Since it's realizing its potential now, it is considered to have the same status as the parent vegetable, and it doesn't lose its chashivos. It's considered to be a full-fledged vegetable with regard to bracha of ha'adama. Continues the Gemara. Omar B'chir Barashi. Pas tnuma bekara. If you have a dried bread, a slice of bread that you're soaking in a dish, mevarchan alei hamoitzi. You make a bracha of hamoitzi. Taisus asks the obvious kasha. Certainly, if it's bread, certainly make hamoitzi. What's the chiddush here? Says Taisus, we're speaking about that this person is faced with a choice. He has a slice of bread soaking in this kara, and he also has a whole, a complete bread, a shalom nearby. But he prefers this pas truma. He prefers the slice. It is chav, it is more dear to him. He favors it. According to Rav Chia Ba'ashi, what takes precedence? On what does one make a bracha? He makes a bracha on the chaviv, despite the fact that it's merely a slice. It doesn't have the mile of a shalom. He can ignore the shalom and make a bracha on the slice. Uplikid Rav Chia, and this is a disagreement to Rav Chia. Rav Chia, tzarech shetichla bracha mapas. When one makes a bracha of hamoitzi on bread, he's meant to conclude his bracha, to finish his bracha of hamoitzi lechem naaretz im hapas, when he pulls away the slice from the bread. Meaning, one is meant to make a bracha on a shalom, on a whole loaf of bread. He is meant to detach the slice only as he's concluding his bracha. So according to Rav Chia Ba'ashi, a shalom is adif. A shalom takes precedence when he's faced with the choice of a chaviv, a slice which is more dear to him, and a shalom, a complete loaf. He is meant to prefer the shalom. The shalom takes precedence over the slice which is chaviv. So machlekes, what is preferred? Is the slice which is more favorable to him, or the shalom on account of the fact that it's a whole bread? Says Gemara, Maskefla Rava. Rava challenges Rav Chia Ba'ashi. Rav Chia, how could you say that one is meant to make the bracha on the complete loaf and detach the slice as he's concluding his brachas hamoitzi? What do you gain by doing that? Why do you say that one is not meant to make the bracha on the slice? Because when he concludes his bracha hamoitzi, he's concluded on a sliced piece of bread, not on a shalom. And therefore, you say that one is meant to prefer the shalom. Alapas nami. Similarly, when one makes a bracha on a whole loaf, and as he's concluding the bracha, he pulls away the slice and he detaches it. When he actually concludes his bracha, simultaneous with detaching the slice, the gemar, the completion of the bracha, is on what? On a slice. So what do you gain? The bracha is being made on a slice of bread. Elama Rava. Rava says as follows: one is meant to make the complete bracha. Until he completes the bracha, he's not meant to detach the slice. Make a complete bracha on the shalom, and then when he completes his bracha, then pull apart the slice. So we have a machlekes between Rav Chia and Rava. What is the preferred manner of slicing bread? Is one meant to conclude his bracha simultaneous with detaching the slice? According to Rava, no. One is meant to finish his bracha and then, only then, after you made a bracha on a shalom, to detach the slice. Says the Gemara, Nahardoi, the ones in Nahardoi, Avdik Rav Chia, they follow Rav Chia's version, Rav Chia's shita of Rabbanan, however, Avdik Rava, they follow the opinion of Rava. Amar Ravina, Amar Li'ay, my mother told me, Avuch Avdik Rav Chia, follow Rav Chia, the Amar Rav Chia, so Shetichle, Bracha Mapas, one is meant to conclude the bracha simultaneous with pulling away the slice. We're not concerned with the fact that the Gemara bracha is being made on a non-shalom. We look at the main part of the bracha, and that's what determines. For Rabbanan, however, Avdi Karava, Ve'ilchas Karava, the Amar Mevarach, V'achveitzeh, first, one completes his entire bracha on a shalom, and only then slices off a piece from the bread. So in conclusion, when one's faced with a choice of a prusa, which is chavev, a slice which is dear to him, or a shalom, according to the shita of Rav Chia Ba'ashi, he prefers a prusa, one makes a bracha on the sliced bread, since it's chaviv. According to Rav Chia, no, a shalem takes precedence. Now we have a machlekes in Rav Chia and Rava. According to Rav Chia, one concludes his bracha as he's pulling away the slice. According to Rava, one is meant to finish his bracha entirely and only then slice away the piece of bread. So indeed, that is our custom, that was our practice today, that we only cut the bread partway when it's still considered to be a shalem, and we make the bracha, and afterwards, only after we complete the bracha, we break away the slice. However, on Shabbos, Tosfos points out, on Shabbos we don't even cut the bread at all, because we're concerned that perhaps he might cut too much and render it a non-shalem, which is essential. A shalom is essential for Shabbos. We require lechem mishnah, 2 whole loaves of bread. Therefore, one is not meant to cut it at all, so that we're sure that they remain whole, safe and sound for lechem mishnah. Okay, continues the Gemara. Itzma, we learned heviul if name psisim u'shleimin. If one was served pieces of bread, psisim u'shleimin, and whole bread, which one is one meant to make a bracha on? On the pieces or on the shalom? Amar Rafuna, mevarach al psisim. He makes a bracha on the pieces. U'poites hashleim. By doing so, he exempts the whole loaf of bread. Rashi explains that we're speaking about if the shalom and the psisim are both the same size, neither one is larger than the other, so therefore he has an equal choice. He can choose to make a bracha on the sliced or on the whole. There's no precedence, there's no preference, there's no significance to a whole bread over a sliced bread. However, points out Rashi, if the psisim, if the sliced bread is actually larger in size, it is gadol, it is bigger than the shalom, then according to Rav Huna, one is actually meant to make a bracha on the psisim on account of their larger size. When we look at the quantity, that is what determines the chiyuv bracha. According to Rav Yochanan, that is not so. Rav Yochanan Amar shleima mimtzum namufchar, a whole bread, that is the more preferred mitzvah. That is considered to be mufchar. If one is faced with a choice of making a bracha on sliced bread or the whole bread, even if the slices are greater in size than the shalom, the quality is what carries the day. The shalom is of greater importance, of greater chashivas and significance. It is a shalom, it is a whole item. We make a bracha to Hashem on account of Him bringing forth a complete item, and therefore the shalom is something which he's supposed to make the bracha on rather than the psisim. Continues the Gemara. That is only if they're both made of the same type of grain. Suppose they're both made of wheat. So if we have psisim and shleimin both made of wheat, Rav Huna says the large size is what determines, according to Rav Yochanan, this shalom takes precedence. Aval bad, if they're made of different material, prusa shalchitim, if the slice is made of wheat bread, ushleima min hasoirim, and the shalom, the whole bread, is made of an inferior grade of grain, which is sa'irim, barley. Since in the pasuk of the Shivas Haminim, Eretz Chita Sa'ir, Chita comes first, it precedes Sa'irim, so Chita takes precedence, is more significant, it has a greater chashivas than Sa'irim. In this case, Divrei Akal, everybody will agree, even Rabbi Yochanan will agree that Mevarach al Prusa Shal Chitim, he's meant to precede, he's meant to make a bracha on the sliced chitim, on account of their greater significance, u'poiters hashleim shel sa'irim, and he paters, he exempts the shalom, the whole bread made of sa'irim. Since chitim is a greater grain, it is a more significant type of grain, therefore in this case, we're dealing with echos, we're dealing with quality, the quality of the actual material of the bread. Before we were speaking about the form of the bread, the shape of the bread. According to Rav Yochanan, a shalom shape is more chashav than a sliced bread. Since we're dealing with the elements of the shape, but if we're dealing with the element of the actual chaymer, the material, the inherence of the bread, since chitim are more significant, certainly they carry the day, and the one is meant to prefer his bracha and prefer chitim and precede his bracha on the pas chitim, even if it's only a slice, and be moitzi the pas soirim. The echos, the superior quality of the material, of the ingredient of the pas chitim takes precedence over the shalom, the wholeness, the enhanced form of the pas so'irim. Continues the Gemara, Omar Rabbi Yirmiyah Baba, Kitanoi, this appears to be a machlekes tanoim, whether one follows the quality or one follows the shape, the wholeness. Termin batal katan shalim. When one is ready to take truma, to remove a portion and give it to the kohen, what should he prefer? Should one be teirim a whole onion, even if it's very small? Or should he do a half of a large onion? Says the Tanakama, termin batal shalim katan, one is meant to prefer a small onion, even if it's small in size, because it is whole, it is a shalim. Avaloi chatzi batal gadol, but not a half of a large size onion. Ravida imer loi ki ela chatzi batal gadol. You're meant to be teirim a half of a large size batal. Explains the more. What is the basis for that machlekes? My love, it must be b'akim miflagi. This is the reasoning behind their opinions. Marsa v'chashav adif. Ravida holds that a chashiv, something which is significant, something which is bigger. In this case, you're giving the kohen a bigger matana, a bigger truma. He's receiving a greater amount, a larger quantity of truma. Therefore, that takes precedence. Umar savar, Tanakama holds no shalim adif. A something which is whole, a shalim, that takes precedence. That's more important. So therefore, we see that their argument revolves around these svaris. When one is faced with a choice, with two options, should he prefer a davar chashav, something which is more significant, or something which is whole, which is a shalim? Which one should he opt for? According to Rav Yehuda, you opt for the chashav. According to Tanakama, you are meant to choose the shalim. So, similarly regarding the question of a prusel chitim, a slice of chita bread, which is more chashiv, or a whole sa'irim bread, which is a shalim, this revolves around this machlekes. According to the Tanakama, one prefers the shalim of sa'irim. According to Rav Yehuda, one is meant to choose something which is more chashiv, which is the chitim. Says the Gemara, no, there's no connection, there's no correlation between these two discussions. In the case of truma, everybody will agree, hey chadika kohen, if there's a kohen available to give him this truma, everybody will agree, the chashiv adif. One is meant to give him the chashiv, the larger size onion, even if it's only a half onion. Why? Because he's getting more. It's a greater matana, it's a greater gift. And therefore, the chashivus carries the day. Ki pligi, however, this machlekes, Tanakam Rav Yehuda is speaking about like a kohen, there's no kohen available. And therefore, in this case, Tanakama holds, better be mafresh, a whole onion, even if it's smaller. Why? Because it's more durable. So even though it's less chashiv, but it has the durability element, and that is more important. It should last until he finds a kohen. However, Rav Yehuda holds that even in this case, one is meant to be mafresh, something which is bigger, which is larger in size, and is more chashiv. This not as we learned. When there's a kohen available, certainly he'll give him the one that's yafa, that's bigger, that's more chashiv, and the matana is a greater matana. However, when there's no kohen available, then he's meant to prefer something which is more durable, and therefore we opt for the smaller batzal since it has more durability value. Rav Yehuda, even when there's no kohen available, he's meant to prefer the yafa, the bigger size, which is a half of a larger size onion. So there's no connection to our discussion between this type of bread and that type of bread. Everybody agrees that chashiv is adif, something which is more significant, a bigger onion, even if it's only a half onion. Since he's giving the kohen a bigger amount, it's a greater gift. It's a more significant chashav and nesina l'kohen. It is chashav, and therefore that takes precedence. That is a superior factor than merely wholeness. The machlokes is merely in a case when there's no kohen available. Tanakama says, despite the fact that is a small onion, but since it's more durable, that's more important. However, with regard to the question of different types of breads, perhaps everybody will agree that the chashav is adif, the slice of chitim, that takes precedence since it's superior to the sa'ir, to the barley. It is more chashiv, its min is superior, and therefore he's meant to prefer the pras chitim, make a bracha on the chitim, a mitzvah the sa'ir. So in summary, regarding a choice between a slice of bread and a whole bread, if the slice is larger than the whole bread, which one do we prefer? Do we prefer a gadol, something which is larger, something which is greater in size, or does one prefer a shalem? Says Rav Huna, the gadol is more important. Greater in quantity, that is more important. According to Rav Yochanan, the quality, the chashivah, significance of a whole item, that takes precedence, and one is meant to make a bracha on the shalem versus the gadol. Regarding a choice between chitim and sa'ir, certainly in that case everybody agrees that the pas chitim takes precedence on account of its greater superiority, since it is a more chashiv min, even if it's merely a slice. It takes precedence over a whole loaf of bread made from barley. Regarding truma, so if there is a coin available, everybody agrees that we give him the gadol, the greater piece, the larger piece, even if it's only a half, since the matana is matana chashuva, it's a more significant gift to the kohen. However, when there's no kohen available, then we have a machlokes. Despite the fact that the small onion doesn't have the same chashivas, doesn't have the same quantity as the half large size one, nevertheless, Tanakama holds, since it's more durable, we prefer doing that. Ravida says, nevertheless, even if there's no kohen, we are toira min hayofa, since it is more significant, it is more chashiv, because of its larger size. Continues the Gemara regarding the question of a slice or a shalem. Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak, v'yirei shamayim, one who fears Hashem and wants to do a mitzvah in the most preferred manner and accommodate all the opinions. Yoitzi dei shneim, he indeed shall fulfill all the opinions and accommodate all the shittas. Umanai, what is an example of somebody who does that? Marbri Darvina. The Marbri Darvina, maniach prusa b'sech hashlema, he would place the slice underneath the shalem, ubeitzeya, and he would break. It would appear as though he's breaking both. Whether he would break both or only break one of them, only the shalem, it would appear that he's accommodating both shittas, and that is the best way to do things. Amalei, says the Gemara, Tani Tana K'mei Rav Nachman Yitzchak, a Tana stated in front of Rav Nachman Yitzchak, what is the most preferred manner? He places the slice underneath the shalem and breaks the slice. And makes a bracha. What is your name? What is the name of this Tana? Amalei Salman. My name is Salman. The Gilin Yashas points out that at the end of Megillas Rus we find this type of name of Salman. So perhaps there's a connection between the two things. So this was his name, Salman or Shalman. Amalei Sholemata. Your name indicates peace and harmony. And your teaching and your learning, your halacha, also is harmonious. It creates harmony. You've created peace. You've brought harmony and peace between the talmidim. You have taught that one is meant to accommodate all the shittos. He's meant to put the slice together with the shalem and make a bracha on both of them together. Continues the Gemara, Amar of Papa Hakol Moedim at Pesach. Everybody agrees that on Pesach, Shamaniach Prusab Zech Shleim Beitzeh, we're meant to have, in addition to the shalom, also a slice, a piece of matzah, and make the bracha on both of them together. My time and why? Why is Pesach unique? Lechem Oyni Ksiv, because in relation to matzah, Torah uses the term of Lechem Oyni, the bread of poverty, and an ani generally has slices of bread which he collects from the balabatim. So on Pesach, certainly one is meant to also have a slice, a broken matzah together with his whole matzah. One is meant to have two whole loaves. He's meant to break apart the slice two lechem mishnah, two complete and whole loaves. Everybody agrees to that. My time of lechem mishnah ksiv. The Torah referring to the man where they collected a double portion. The Torah says lechem mishnah, two lechems. We learn from there that one is required to have two complete whole breads. Amar Bashi, Chazina of Kahana the Noketarti, he would hold on to two full breads, but he only broke apart one, a batzachada. You don't need to break both of them, but merely one of them. And indeed, that's the way we follow today. We take two whole breads, but we only require breaking one of them. Why? Because the pasuk says, "V'loktu lechem mishnah." They gather a double portion. It doesn't say they broke both of them. They gather two, so one is meant to hold both of them, but he needs to only break apart, slice one of them. Kadina Zigmora of Zera have a batza kula shirusa. Rav Zera would slice on Shabbos. He would slice off a piece of a bread large enough, which was sufficient for the entire meal. Amle Ravina Rashi. One is meant to do so. This looks like gluttony. It's not derech eretz to break apart such a big piece of bread. Amar lei. So Rav Ashi told him, "Kiven the kol yom alayah kavod hachi." We know that during the week he doesn't follow this type of practice. Ve'in the kavod, only on Shabbos he does so. There must be a special reason. It's on account of his chavivas of Einik Shabbos, that Einik Shabbos is dear to him, so the Shabbos is dear to him. Therefore, like mischazik Rav Zunusa, it doesn't look like gluttony. It is not a lack of derech eretz, but really he is doing a mitzvah in Amuvchar to show his dearness of the Shabbos Suda. So, in conclusion, again, we have a machlekes regarding a choice of a slice and a sholem. However, on Pesach, certainly one is meant to also have a cracked matzah because of lechem oini. On Shabbos, one is meant to take 2 whole breads because of lechem mishnah. And as the Gemara said, the Yirei Shamayim is meant to do so. The entire year is meant to take the shalom together with the prusa. If he has a choice of one or the other, make a bracha on both of them together to accommodate all the shittas. Finally, says the Gemara, Rav Amar Rav Asi, when they had the bread used for the mitzvahs erev chatzeres, we know that the Chachamim prohibited carrying from one domain to the other. If there is a bunch of houses surrounding a courtyard, you can't carry from one domain to the other unless each one deposits a bread, a portion of bread. There's many halachas regarding this erev chatzeres discussed in Maseches Erevin coming up. So in any case, this bread, this erev chatzeres, a mitzvah was done to it. So if Rav Amar Rav Asi had in their possession this bread, which the mitzvah erev was done to it, they would use it for their, some say it was for their Sudas Shabbos, and make a bracha of ha'maitzah lechem haaretz, and be makayim the mitzvah ha'maitzah, makayim mitzvah lechem mishnah. Why? Why did they prefer this specific lechem amr? They said, since a mitzvah was already done to it, the mitzvah erev chatzeres, which is the mitzvah d'Rabbanan, if so, let us add on another mitzvah and do another mitzvah with this same item, with the same object. It's like a mitzvah, a gereris mitzvah, and therefore they prefer to use this bread since a mitzvah was already done to it.